Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello. Hello.
How's it going?
I'm just skippy. How are you?
So damn skippy.
Skippy, a little flummy.
That's true.
But the weather has flipped. Finally, so it's a little bit cooler.
Yeah, I'm actually like, this is the perfect, to me, the upper 70s.
Yes.
With some rainy days here and there. Like, that's the perfect kind of weather.
It is.
Yeah, I even got out for a hike finally. Because it got so hot so fast this year. I didn't get any, late spring hikes in. Because it was all... It's going to be 50, 40, 30, 90. That's what it did this year. So no hikes this summer at all because it was just fucking hot.
Oh, I know this will be old news by the time this comes out, but Hurricane Ian just hit this last week. My sister-in-law sent me, what was the town it hit the hardest? Fort Myers?
Yes.
She sent me a video of a shark swimming up the street in Fort Myers.
Okay, wait though. I've seen that video every single hurricane.
No, it's not a giant, big, this is going to bite your leg off. It was a little one.
Yeah.
But it looks, I don't know, it looks real. I'll send it to you.
Okay. But, yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm not just, it could happen. It's not that. It's not that I disbelieve a hurricane. It's just that every single hurricane, I see the video of the shark.
Oh, like the dolphins in the Venice Canal?
Yes. And so, and I'm just like, either there's always a shark and people should stop being surprised.
That could
or it's
be
the same video, and I've seen that happen with so many things where, here's a fire, and then they're like, look at this picture, and then you find out that fire, that's not even a picture of that fire.
Yes.
I don't know why
because
people...
the cloud is in the shape of Satan's head. And I'm like, I didn't know that we knew what his head looked like.
That's right.
In fact, he existed.
It's his conjectured head.
Yes.
But yeah, That's it's just like when you have a fire, the bears are in downtown or whatever, right? You got your shark going through the town.
Yeah.
Now, if it actually has background, everybody knows that that's Fort Myers, then that's different. But yeah, I just think that's because I remember the first time I saw the shark video and I hook, line, and sinker, right?
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd seen it. And it was probably, I think it was meant to be in Texas or something. I don't know, Galveston and then I look and somebody's like, oh, and here's an article where this shark video was posted 10 years ago. And I'm like, well, the shark went into a town at some point, so there.
There was a shark in town. I'm just not specifying what town.
What town.
Or
right.
when.
Yeah, everybody I know seems to have come through it okay. So apparently I don't know anybody who lives in Fort Myers.
I have a niece in Port Richey, which is not far from there, but she and her fiance just built a new house and moved in, but they survived okay. They have the screen houses over their swimming pools down there, and they lost some of the screen house, but that's nothing. That's repairable. That's doable. So, but yeah, everybody we know down there is fine.
You say somebody, I was at a thing yesterday, and there was somebody who was supposed to go to Florida next week, and they're debating on it now because it's one of the towns that was hit. And I was like, well, I have something to tell you. I went to Savannah the week after a hurricane,
that's right.
a solid hurricane, and have to tell you that those coastal folks, they want that money coming in after, because we called and we talked to the people at the hotel, and we were like, I mean, is anything going to be open? And second, but more importantly, how do people in town feel?
Yes. Do you want us there?
And they were like, they're going to need the tourist dollars now more than ever. I can tell you right now, things will be reopened. And when we got there, other than them they were still drying out the hotel we were in. They had dehumidifiers on every floor, and the carpet was still a little sodden leading into the room. And so you could see little things like that, and little things like still some sandbags and stuff. But honestly, everything was fully running and functional, and the tours were all going. If you live on the coast where the hurricanes hit, you come back from it very fast, because this is just your life.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was like, I wouldn't discredit it. They should call and talk to somebody that they, if they're staying at a hotel or something, they should ask them, and they'll tell them. Because
Yeah.
we were like, now truly, like, people aren't going to resent us being there. And everybody was like, they were like, well, we're so glad you're here. You know, Southern. But,
Southern hospitality.
yeah. But it all seemed like everybody was just back to their normal roles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was like just a little, yep, ignore that sandbag. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you're visiting someplace that was without power and like they don't have it the day before you're going, and then maybe but
Yeah. Like that's definitely something to check on because we monitored.
And I didn't even see any reports or video from Disney.
No, but Deanna did say the Waffle Houses were back open. So that was. I almost said that to the person yesterday and they wouldn't have gotten it. Oh, well, Waffle House is reopened, so you can go.
And somebody posted an article to me about how the National Weather Service actually uses Waffle House. I'm like, yes, I know. Isn't that amazing?
I mean, Waffle House started in Georgia, right? I'm pretty sure it originated.
Somewhere down there. I think it was Georgia. I should know because I did that whole Waffle House episode that I talked about for weeks.
Right.
It was such a great, how have you been? Great. Do you know what happens in Waffle Houses? And people are like, do I want to know? Well, let me tell you a couple things that have happened in a Waffle House.
Do you have Peacock?
I'm going to say probably.
Because I think I've mentioned it on here because Snoop has that stupid criminal show that he does.
Oh, yes. And I haven't watched that.
Yeah, because he has that episode that covers the guy who tied the door shut with his pants.
Yes.
I was getting all irritated though, so I'm watching it, and I'm sure Jeff was like, just shut up. Because they kept saying he used an article of clothing, and I was like, just say what it was. You just showed video of him falling out of the ceiling with no pants on. Just say it was his pants.
So, the other night, I'm scanning around, and there was I don't know, it could have been a documentary. It was like a fake documentary / movie. It was about Robert the Doll.
Oh, really?
In Florida, the Keys, Key West. And they had this medium come in, and she was talking about the doll and how the doll had been cursed. And I'm just yelling at the TV. I'm like, it wasn't given to them by a servant. A servant couldn't have afforded that flippin' doll. A human-sized doll made to look like the owner's son.
That happens with like true crime things all the time though too. Like that is not even what happened.
Nope.
By the way, I got to do a night before screening through Amazon because of the HWA, I guess. Brady Hendrix's
What did you screen?
My best friend's exercise.
I hate you.
The thing is, I thought about inviting you over so we could do a whole thing, and I had class with Karina until like half an hour before, but my whole thing was if you didn't get signed in fast enough because there were only a number of slots, and I was like, I might have had you over, and then we would have been like, well, that was fun. We missed that. Bye. So it was good on its own. They changed everything from the book. I like other than the overarching plot. It took me a minute to figure out. They even switched around some of the. Okay, it's not like it's a spoiler. If you know about what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. The whole girl being into is he a pastor, reverend, whatever?
He was some kind of pastor.
He was some religious figure there at the school. They switched that on to another of the girls, and then they invented a whole new thing here. It was, but in its own right, it was.
Okay, so I will wait and watch the movie, and then I'll reread the book. Yeah, because it just floated up in the flop.
Because I just read it a couple weeks ago, so it was too fresh. And I was so it actually confused me in a way that probably people who hadn't read it wouldn't be confused because I'm like, wait, what's happening?
And you know
what
me,
is this? What are they doing?
I can't remember the details. So.
Right.
Okay, I'll watch it before I reread it.
Because it's streaming on Amazon, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm very excited for that one. But I also want to see that series that you and Patrick were talking about.
What that?
The one that Jensen Ackles is in.
Oh, Big Sky.
Big Sky. So I want to start at the beginning and watch that Because not only is Jensen Ackles in it, Reba McEntire
But he's not in it till that's what I saw. Okay, here's the thing. So there's a new image up because the third season had popped or whatever, right. I guess. And again, I hadn't even watched the second season. I watched the first episode, then I get distracted, and then I forget I'm watching the thing.
Yes.
And so now I've been watching it again, and yes, Big Sky is good in its own right. It's a nice, two strong women who are they make mistakes. They're human. It's not the otherworldly strong women. But yes, the picture popped and I went, is that Reba? And then I went, is that Jensen? Because it's kind of stylized, almost cartoon in a way. Like, not cartoon, but that, degrees of cartoon that you can do in all those apps now. And so I was like, well, maybe it isn't them, because that's two people that I can pretty much recognize anywhere, though, right?
Well, I didn't see that. I actually saw I think Patrick posted the trailer.
Okay.
And so I watched the trailer and I was like, ooh, yes.
I love Reba. I can listen to Reba talk. Just talk.
I love her.
That's her and Dolly Parton. I'm like, both. And there's some, I've never even heard him sing. Nope. He's a big guy, big country singer, but his talking voice is, oh my God, dude. It's one of those where I'm like, oh, keep talking.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Dude.
Almost there. Keep talking. No, just kidding. But nope. Trace Atkins is his name. So anyway.
I just heard him the other day. You are absolutely correct.
Oh my God. His voice is fantastic. And again, I don't know how he sings. I haven't even heard him sing. I don't think, but talking, I'm all in. But yeah, anyway, so I was excited to see both of them on it, but of course I didn't know and I hadn't looked it up. So now I have to get through the goddamn second season to get to the third season.
I have to find it and start the first season.
Right? It's on Hulu. So, yes, but I like it. It's a good show.
Which means commercials, because I will not pay for Hulu Plus with no commercials.
We held out, and then we were like, my husband really hates a commercial. He's like, what year is this? Why are we watching commercials? It is 2022. There should be no more commercials. All right. So, because we were watching something that was like that. But anyway, we're doing our Halloween watches. What have you? Even though I watch horror year-round, I kick it up a little in October.
Yes, and even I try to watch.
Yeah.
We've done Hocus Pocus 1 and 2, so I cleared that hurdle for the month.
It's going to be, I know what she did last summer, probably tonight with my daughter because she hasn't seen it. We found there's a TV show of I Know What She Did Last Summer, and it's terrible, and yet we couldn't stop watching it like a train wreck last night. I was like, whoever wrote this thinks high schoolers are, as my daughter said, oh, don't you know teenagers do drugs 24/7 now? Like, they're all doing drugs. There's so much weird sex stuff happening. They show one of the dads. There was full frontal at the beginning of it, and we were both like, why? Because they're at a party, and then there's some dude who's got his pants down around his ankles standing over the pool pissing full frontal, and I'm like, why did we need to see that?
It's just like the whole thing with people throwing up. Now you have to see it coming out of their mouth, and I'm like, that throws me out of the story faster than anything, because I'm like, that makes me want to throw up myself, which is not a good feeling when you're watching a movie.
Yeah, we had a boy child came and watched my best friend's exorcism with us, and we were eating. And possession, vomit.
Yeah.
And he was just like, I was not warned. And then there's something with a tapeworm coming out of somebody's mouth. Yeah. And he was like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm like, I can keep eating through just about anything. So I had 4 younger siblings. I'd seen, it's basically like a possession and exorcism all the time. No,
you could be you would be the kind of medical examiner who had a scalpel in one hand and a sandwich in the other.
Yeah, I probably would.
Should we start?
We're going to start. Yeah. So mine's, I feel like a dark subject, not because it's like exorbitant, like a crazy serial killer, but because it's incredibly sad. And then we'll end with something positive, even though she'll have dark first. So that's your warning.
Yes. But I in the middle, I have this little bitty fun thing
thing. If you're thinking of starting a podcast or even just starting to research it, Buzzsprout is your go-to source for information and hosting. They have tons of videos and write-ups on everything you need to know about recording and distributing a podcast, and they even provide easy ways to get analytics on how your podcast is doing. We use Buzzsprout for our podcast hosting, and through them, we've been able to connect with tons of resources and distributors. Following a link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and helps support our show. A win-win. Not only do they help you get started, but they also do small things to encourage you, such as awarding you badges as you hit various milestones. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. So I'm doing Susan Smith and Andrea Yates. And I'm going to send out a thanks to one of our listeners. That's Carol. It's Buko or Buko, B-U-K-O. Sorry, Carol. I hate mispronouncing people's names. Pet peeve of mine. She mentioned this crime to us. She sent us a message and I was like, you know what? That's the closest we've gotten to really a listener request in a while. So I'm going to do it. And it was, I actually had it, I have a list, but it's like 4 pages long. Every time I run across something I might want to talk about, I put it on this list. And we're talking, yellow legal notepad, 4 pages. So I bumped it up.
I have a Pinterest board. It's hidden. I have a Pinterest board where I stick things.
Yeah, and I also have a folder of like screen captures of things that I see when I'm going through Facebook on my phone and something pops up because I'm on all those random facts and scary facts and blah, blah, all those. And so I get some good ideas from those. And often of things that I wouldn't have heard of otherwise. So this one is a crime that stuck with me. That's why it was on my list. Because we'll say the news story aired October 25th, 1994 for the first time, and this went on for 9 days before there were answers. And there was an oddly muted, we'll say, woman named Susan Smith who's pleading for her boys' lives, and not an ounce of it was believable. Even to me, who was a high schooler at the time, I went, well, she's lying. I turned to my mom and was like, she's lying. She doesn't care. This is weird. Anyway, she was 23 at that time. And of course, what did she do? This is why every time you mention something like this in a story, I'm like, because ever since this woman did this, it's been on my radar and I've seen how often it happens. She claimed a black man had carjacked her and taken her sons. She was making up a whole thing, right? And she had to claim there was a black man, and that just killed me.
Because there's nothing that any criminal wants more than 2 small children.
Right? And they were Michael 3, Alexander 14 months. So yes, very small children. Adorable. I'll post a picture of them. But it turns out that as suspicious I was, the cops were, of course, pretty suspicious of her too. But they also, their whole thing was, doesn't matter, we'll look into this, but we're trying to find these boys. They thought the boys might still be alive. There was hope. She had hidden them somewhere, or she had done something like that. That's what they're thinking. Susan Smith claimed a light had turned red at an intersection, even though there were no other cars, and that she'd been carjacked at that light. The day after the boys' disappearance, police determined the light was not on a timer, so it wouldn't have turned red for her unless another car had been at the intersection, because she kept stressing there were no other cars, there were no witnesses, there was nothing. So they started searching bodies of water. They thought because her car was gone, of course, and so they're like, okay, this is what people do. They drive somebody into the water. And so they're searching for them. They figured the car would be about 30 feet off the shore, and they searched all the local bodies of water. They did not find anything. So then they put Susan and her husband David through polygraphs. And here's the annoying thing about this. Did they pass? Did they fail? Nobody frickin' said. They just kept saying they put them through polygraphs, so I'm assuming they passed?
I would have to think so.
So, right? Like, on November 3rd, Susan Smith confessed that she had killed her sons by letting the van she'd taken. There was a pier, and she'd just put the car in neutral and pushed it on in and watched it sink with her babies in there. Into John D. Long Lake was the name of it. That's such a weird name for a lake. It came out that she was in a relationship with a man named Tom Findlay, and whether he was her boss or her boss's son has been debated in the stuff. People have taken it. I actually mostly saw it was her boss. And so this was a person that was fairly wealthy. And this man had broken off the relationship with a letter stating he didn't want children so they could not be together. He said he didn't want a, quote, ready-made family. She came with luggage, right? However, she said she had not planned on killing her boys, that she wasn't in her right mind when it happened. This is what she would say then. It's what she still says now. And in fact, she said she was planning on killing herself, not her sons. Police were able to find the vehicle after the confession, and the reason it had escaped detection is that it was a full 122 feet off the shore of the lake. Usually, again, it's within that 30 feet. So this is like 4 times the distance they had thought to check. The boys were strapped into the car seats, and there was a little stuffed animal floating in there.
Oh, God.
A psychiatrist who met with her during the trial stated she had dependent personality disorder and major depression. So I looked up dependent personality disorder because that's a new one on me. And it's what it sounds like, right? People with DPD have, quote, pervasive psychological dependence on other people. And it's a long-term condition in which people depend on others to meet their emotional and physical needs, with only a minority achieving normal levels of independence. So it sounds like it can be a pretty incapacitating thing. It's characterized by excessive fear and anxiety of losing people. As a kid, Susan's parents had a violent marriage. Her father committed suicide when she was 6, and her mother married Beverly Russell, a member of the Republican Party and a Christian coalition leader who testified. He testified during her trial, admitting he had molested her when she was a teenager and that they had been having, I don't believe this for a second, but anyway, having consensual sexual relations for the last few months. So supposedly this relationship had carried on. And I'm like, is it consensual if you've already damaged her, like, emotionally in such a way? No. Because he's still her stepfather.
Man, I hope his dick just rots off.
Yeah. I don't think it's hurt him at all. By the way, this leader of the Christian coalition and all that, it never hurts him, does it?
No.
He said he bore some of the responsibility for what she'd done. No shit. She had actually turned him into her mother during her teen years when this was happening. She went to her mom, and mom kicked him out briefly. Social services ended up coming in. Social services didn't do jack shit. And so what they did is they got family counseling together, and her mom moved him back in. And he continued molesting her. Yep. And this time Susan didn't tell because her mother had berated her for telling everyone and making it public, in quotes, and bringing that drama into their lives. So she blamed her daughter. So of course her daughter wasn't going to be like, well, he's doing it again.
No. Her mother taught her.
Mothers who do this shit kill me. Anyway, when she was 13, Susan attempted suicide. She would do so again as an adult after a breakup and miscarriage before she had met her husband. Susan's marriage to David was on again, off again at this time. Both have had affairs. I think she had the affairs first. It sounds to nobody said it, and you're going to see why later. It sounds to me like she possibly has a sex addiction, or it's that thing that I've seen repeatedly with women. And it makes sense with that dependent personality disorder. That a lot of times we see that women, when they're trying to hold on to somebody, they think the answer to that is give them sex. I've seen this time and again.
It's how they define their personality.
Right.
Is through sex.
And so this gives them value and they think it will keep the person with them, but of course it doesn't. But I've seen that over and over again. So I had to wonder how much of it is that. Like I didn't spend an hour researching DPD, right?
Right.
So to me, those things met up. And again, because I've seen it so much in real life, that I was like, eh. So they had filed for divorce in 1994, and bear in mind that earlier in 1994, this whole thing happened October 25th, 1994. And the divorce would go through in 1995 after the boys were gone. While she was up for the death penalty, the jury, which had taken less than 3 hours to find her guilty, it pretty much said 2.5 hours everywhere, of the murders of her sons, instead gave her life imprisonment. So I feel like they did try and take into account that she had these
that she was
mental
deeply
health
disturbed.
issues. Yes. Yeah. And she was given a possibility of parole after 30 years, and that's actually coming up in 2024.
Wow.
And that is the type of crime where I feel like, I know we all want the monster to burn in hell, right? But when you really stop to logically think about it, is this a thing they're going to repeat? You know, they're not going to get out and go randomly kill people. They'd have to procreate first. But so do you really need more than 30 years for it? It depends on what your definition of what prison's purpose is, right? Her imprisonment has been peppered with disciplinary actions for self-harm, sexual relations, and drug use. Two prison officials have been disciplined for having ongoing sexual relationships with her. In 2000, a 50-year-old guard, she was 28 at the time, I think, Houston Cagle, confessed to having sex with her repeatedly. He went to jail for 3 months for it. In 2001, it was a prison captain named Alfred Rowe, and he got 5 years probation. I know that Houston Cagle lost his job. For some reason, his was in the news way more than Alfred Rowe, even though this guy was a prison captain, I feel like that was an even bigger deal.
Yeah.
This was the boss of the people, I assume.
Yeah.
And they were just everybody fucking her, I guess. So anyway, they got a slap on the wrist for, that's a control, that's a power.
Yeah.
If you're a guard at the prison, you have the power, and therefore
Yes.
it's an abuse of that authority and their power.
Having sex with your prisoner is not about sex.
That's disgusting.
I
meant like sex itself, not just, but it's disturbing.
Yes.
Because what happens if they say no? And I'm not saying she didn't purposely, I'm sure she did, because she was very sexually active. Somebody who was in a prison cell with her said that they were constantly her lookout. She would sleep with other inmates. So I really she has some sort of sex addiction, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why not one article addressed that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were, they weren't even a source ultimately for me, because the articles were so awfully patricide. I don't know. It was Fox News kept doing articles basically talking about what a trash person she was for all this.
It doesn't matter if she comes on to you. If she is in your care,
right,
whether you're a doctor or you're a prison guard, or if you're judged, if your job is to keep her confined, your job is not to have sex with her. Your job is not to abuse her, because it is abuse.
It is, yeah.
And take advantage of her. It doesn't matter if she hit on you. You say no, dumbass.
Yeah. It just...
yeah.
But slap on the wrist for those guys. Oh. In 2015, she wrote, and she gets in trouble, by the way. I mean, she does get punished with this and rights taken away and et cetera, for these actions. And I'm like, in this case, absolutely fucking not. For the drug stuff, yes, I totally get that. But why is she being disciplined? Because your employees were having sex with her.
Yeah.
Anyway, in 2015, she wrote to a South Carolina newspaper. This all happened in South Carolina, by the way, called The State, in an attempt to defend herself. She wrote, quote, "I am not the monster society thinks I am. I am far from it. Something went very wrong that night. I was not myself. I was a good mother and I loved my boys. There was no motive, as it was not even a planned event. I was not in my right mind." She also said, "The thing that hurts me most is that people think that I hurt my children in order to be with a man, and that is so far from the truth." So, end quote. Those who've dealt with her during her incarceration say she is a master manipulator. Because I was I'm reading other stuff, and I'm like, why didn't anybody ever consider postpartum depression and stuff for her, right? Because most often when a mom harms her kids, there's some sort of massive depression.
And especially because in light of the fact that she tried to kill herself twice before that.
3 times. And that she was back in a relationship for the last few months. Relationship I use loosely, with her stepfather.
Who had abused her as a
this
teenager.
guy had dumped her, and she had DPD. She was in the middle of probably in a separation and getting a divorce from her husband. And she had a 14-month-old. So, and a 3-year-old. Two bad ages, but my point being that she could still have had postpartum depression if nobody had noticed it in her. So I don't know. I didn't find that anywhere, so I can't say she had it or not. But so I was starting to feel a little, I was like, she's always been a monster to me, but then I was starting to feel a little sympathetic, but then they're talking to people and they're like, she's a master manipulator. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I really don't know. She has been in a long-distance relationship with a man who she exchanges letters with and who sends her money. They're talking about marriage if and when she gets paroled in 2024. She is in a similar case. So I decided to move on and look at a similar case that I knew involved postpartum depression. I had postpartum depression. It's a dark thing.
Yes, it is.
And I didn't kill my children. I didn't come close to killing my children, but I did other things that I feel guilty about. And, it's not a great thing to go through.
And do you remember when it was a big furor because Brooke Shields talked about having postpartum depression, And then Tom Cruise, I'm sorry, Tom, where's your vagina?
This is when he
where's your
died
uterus? Yes. He was like, there's no such thing as postpartum depression. And I just went, he is dead to me.
Mm-hmm.
That little short fucker is dead to me now.
Because it's so easy to overlook and it's so easy to not be seen. My whole thing was my husband was out of the country most of the time for his job. So it's just me and my child and my postpartum depression that nobody noticed. And yeah, it was a fluke that it got noticed and got treated, because when you're in that condition, you don't know you're in that condition.
No.
So
you just think that everything is wrong with you.
Yes. So it's something that is important to me personally, because people don't understand the things that a person can do. And obviously, again, I didn't kill any children. So, does something else have to be wrong for that? Well, we'll see. So anyway, I'm going to talk about Andrea Yates. And she drowned her 5 children in a bathtub, June 20th, 2001.
I remember that one too.
Oh, yeah. Her kids were 7-year-old Noah, 5-year-old John, 3-year-old Paul, 2-year-old Luke, and 6-month-old Mary. Anybody see a trend with those names?
Yeah.
It's going to come into play. Unlike Susan, Andrea had documented mental health issues before the murders. A lot. Severe. I'm going to go into this, and I don't even think she's the one who should have been punished for this. So anyway, she was bulimic as a teen, diagnosed with depression at age 17, because she'd been talking to a friend about suicide at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until her 4th child was born, though, that the postpartum depression reared its ugly head, right? She had made it through 3 kids.
Oh, my God.
Things were okay. She would go back on her medication. But anyway, she attempted to commit suicide by overdosing after this birth. She ended up hospitalized twice and was put on antidepressants at first, then Haldol, an antipsychotic.
Wow, that's like a big one.
Yeah. With the addition of Haldol, she was thought to be stable. She would improve, things seemed better, but later that same year, she had a full nervous breakdown and attempted suicide again. It was during yet another hospitalization that she was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. So one step farther. During psychological treatment, she was told by a psychiatrist that she should not have any more kids, as she would be almost guaranteed to have further psychological issues as a result, and they would be in danger. 7 weeks after her discharge from this psychiatrist, she became pregnant again, on purpose, by the way. And she went off her Haldol, of course. She couldn't be on it while she was pregnant. And then about 5 months after her daughter was born, her father died.
Oh.
So she's just had a baby. She already has documented postpartum issues.
She has 4 other small children.
Died. Yes. And your typical Christian father who's all about quiverful, who's also all about, I'm going to be out all the time. And you're going to take care of these children. Things went further downhill after her father's death, of course. She stopped taking all her medications, practiced self-mutilation, and stopped feeding her daughter while reading her Bible obsessively. She was hospitalized due to becoming incapacitated, and upon release, she drowned her children. Boom. Jesus. She was hospitalized. She said that she had thought about doing it earlier, but had decided against it. Her psychiatrist felt she'd been filling the tub to kill herself, but in an altered state had drowned her children one at a time instead. And I'm like, She started with the 3 younger boys, one by one, who she put in bed, wrapped in a sheet afterwards, all together. Then she drowned Mary, and while Mary was still in the tub, her oldest, Noah, came in and said, "What's wrong with Mary?" She would later admit that he had run from her, so she had chased him down, then drowned him.
Oh.
She put Mary in bed in one of her brother's arms, and then Noah was left floating in the tub. She just left his little body in there. She called the police and said she needed someone to come out right away, but wouldn't tell them why. She also called her husband and told him to come home, also did not tell him why. The psychiatrist who had released her had done so with firm instructions that she was not to be left unsupervised and was a danger. However, her husband went to work that day, leaving her alone with their children. And I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. Her attorney went for the insanity defense, but the state of Texas had requirements that didn't allow it in her case. Those requirements have since been looked at. The prosecution went for the death penalty, because of course, a mother doing something wrong, it's always worse than a dad doing something wrong, right? But the jury, they did find her guilty of the murders, but they turned down the death penalty. They didn't think it was right in this case. Instead, she got life in prison with parole eligibility after 40 years. And here's the thing about this. When you compare this to convictions of men for various other crimes, including being serial killers sometimes, both these women got life.
Mm-hmm.
And no parole for 30 or 40 years. You often see like the parole after 15 years, 10 years or whatever for these men who commit these crimes. But nothing bothers society more than a mother killing her kids. Mm-hmm. And it's true. I feel it too, like, but that's just another element of that bias.
It's visceral.
Yes.
That parent-child
Because you can't imagine how a person gets to that point. I certainly can't. She appealed based on an expert psychiatric witness who had admitted after that he lied on the stand. He said something about, and it was a jury, he said something about there being a Law & Order SVU episode or something that was about it. So he spun that to say she copied the episode and did this on purpose. And it turned out somebody later went public about it and said there's no such episode. There would be an episode after based on her.
Right.
There was no existing episode at that time, and so they felt that it biased the jury. When an expert goes up there and says she did it, and she did it because she copied a television episode. Oh my God. So anyway, it did get overturned because of that, and she was retried. In July 2006, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and she was released from prison to be committed to a psychiatric facility. They didn't say just let her go.
Right.
Okay, so I think this is right. She belongs in a psychiatric facility. Her husband, Rusty, tried to claim he had never been told she might harm the children, but there was plenty of proof that he indeed was. And there were the mental health experts were like, excuse the fuck out of me. And Andrea had also said that she had told him. Because when he wanted to get pregnant with Mary, she had tried to say, no, I don't think I should. When he tried to get her to go off the medication so they could get pregnant, he said, you're a great mom. You can handle this. You just need to, buck up and be strong and you can get through this. And he reminded her, of course, that his belief was that they were quiverful, that they were their purpose on this earth through his religious beliefs was that they were supposed to have as many children as nature would allow. He had also said this in consultations because these psychiatrists and whatever would have him come in so they could talk to him about it, even though he claimed that didn't happen, right? They each time told him, and he would flat out told them, no, we believe in that we will continue having children, as many as God wants us to have, right? He totally ignored her when she said, no, I don't think this is a good idea. I mean, she said that something bad could happen, right? And he also told her family the week before the kids were killed, or within a couple weeks, he had like a family meeting and told her family that he was going to start leaving her alone for increasing increments of time, even though the doctor had said, do not leave her alone. He said he wanted to ensure she didn't become too dependent upon him and she needed to buck up. He told her brother that people who are depressed just needed a swift kick in the pants to motivate them. Do you understand who I think should have been convicted for this?
Yeah.
Even during her trial, he believed she would be found innocent, would go through mental health treatment, and that she would return home and they could continue where they left off and have more children. After she killed his 5 children. Susan Smith's husband, appropriately emotional. Still, because she murdered his children. Okay? They've interviewed him. This Rusty guy, everything I read from him was him being defensive and saying he didn't know and that it was all on the medical community for not stopping her. It was their responsibility, not his. And that's all I have not even seen him talk about being sad about his children. So, like, you're supposed to repopulate the earth, but you're not supposed to care about them?
Because they weren't important to him. They were possessions. I will be,
as was his wife.
Yeah, I will have a higher standing if I have more children.
And he thought he could just, just goad her into being sane.
That's
through his willpower and hers, she would become sane.
That is not how that works.
Yeah. So then he and his family, who of course backed him, because of course they had the same religious ideals and beliefs, claimed it was homicidal ideation due to Effexor, an antidepressant she was on. And then he was also like, and it's because this guy didn't put her on Haldol and yada, yada, yada. And so they tried to make it all about Effexor. And I'm not saying that that's not homicidal ideation, I think, is a side effect of Effexor. But this is not that.
Yeah.
She was already unstable.
That could have added to it.
Yes.
But
they were both said to be under the influence of an extreme preacher named Michael Woroniecki, something like that, who sent out a newsletter called The Perilous Times. He was a big brimstone guy, right?
Ugh.
And the Yates got his newsletter. In prison, Yates said she had thought about killing her kids for 2 years before she finally did so, which, by the way, would have been like from the birth of the one, because she was a bad mother and they weren't normal. They weren't developing normally, she said. And a quote, "It was the seventh deadly sin. My children weren't righteous. They stumbled because I was evil. The way I was raising them, they could never be saved. They were doomed to perish in the fires of hell." So my whole thing is, she had these little boys that were, what was the oldest? 7 or something like that?
Yeah.
And little Noah. And that is a lot. I grew up in a family of 5 with 3 boys in the middle.
Yes.
Right? She had 4 boys, close in age, and this baby. And that is a fucking lot when you don't have a partner that helps you.
Now, did it say anywhere how big her family was?
No, but I know she had at least a brother.
Right. Because I'm just thinking, I can understand her not knowing, okay, and maybe it was just the 2 of them. You don't know what it's like to have a lot of kids if you didn't grow up in a family with a lot of kids. And
if you're already suffering from major depression issues and you have 5 babies, that's a fucking lot.
Because that's 5 kids, 7 and under.
Yeah.
That's
4 of them boys.
Oh.
I just need to stress that because I have been there with 3. And that was
cleaning
enough,
up
you guys.
A lot of pee.
Right. And they would have wrestled and fought, and of course, in that sort of household, the boys are pretty much, from what I've seen,
encouraged.
Yes, because everything's about the male in that house.
Yes.
So, so of course, but she saw that as that probably normal boy stuff as abnormal development. And I don't know if her brother's older than her. She doesn't know what a little boy was like. Rusty filed for divorce in 2004, and it was granted in 2005. In 2006, he got remarried. They had a son, but she divorced him in 2015.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah. So this past April, Andrea's annual review by Careville State Hospital passed, with Andrea refusing to attend the hearing. She has refused the hearing every single year. That hearing is to say, let's see if you can go back out.
Right.
Nope. She's grieving her children still. She watches videos of them that she has from home videos. Oh. And she has 0 interest. She's not willing to leave the psychiatric facility. She feels she can't. So she makes gift items and sells them anonymously, and all that income goes to the Yates Children Memorial Fund. It's a fund that was set up by her attorney and his wife, and I think at her request or whatever, and it supports women's mental health with an emphasis on postpartum depression. So that's awesome. I'd never heard of it before. No. So there you go. There's another charity for folks to look at. And because that's important, because again, nobody gives a shit. Nobody pays attention. And that's how shit like this happens. I'm currently following the case of Erin Murdy, who a few weeks ago allegedly drowned her 3 kids in the water off Coney Island in New York City. Yeah. So I've been watching that. Sources say she was facing eviction at the time, but there's no other information. Her youngest was also a baby. Oh. So sounds like it's the same sort of thing, but this is all allegedly.
Yes.
Because she has not actually been through court yet. Sources were Wikipedia, People, Biography, A&E, Film Daily, Yahoo News, and CNN.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to just jump right into this because that is fairly depressing. Yeah,
when I talked about the sleepwalking murders, this is the same sort of thing. Those babies are looking up at their mother.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why she's doing this to them. It just like, for some reason, somebody's mental state when they're getting murdered really gets to me. And knowing and loving the person who's doing it to me just seems like such a terrible way to die.
Yeah.
And for these babies, when they're, again, it is that thing where this crime is always going to bother people more than some other kinds of crimes.
Yes. So I've been saving this little tidbit It's not my bit for this week, but it's my little tidbit for this week. It was the beginning of camping season in Port Hedland in Western Australia, and everyone was excited, including a feral pig. Okay, first of all, I love any story that starts with a feral pig. That stole 3 6-packs of beer from campers at a DeGray River campsite. The pig then went on a drunken rampage, ripping through rubbish bins and stealing snacks. Wait, before starting a fight with a nearby cow. So you've got a drunk feral pig picking a fight with a cow. A random passerby cow. I'm like, why is this not being made into a movie? So, when it became a losing fight for the pig, which kind of surprised me, the drunken swine swam across the river and found a shady spot beneath a tree to sleep it off. The pig, whose kind is considered an invasive pest in many parts of Australia, was not charged for the theft of the beer or the assault on the cow, but the campers received a stern warning to keep their food and beverages locked up. This is what was on my crime a day calendar one day.
The swinging pig.
It was the whole fight with the cow that got me. Like, fucking cow minding its own business.
Right, just you chewing some cud.
And how does a pig even pick a fight? How does one pick a fight
Ramming
with a cow?
into its legs.
That would do it, probably.
And winking at it.
All right.
And the cow's like, what the fuck, bro?
Yeah, the cow's like...
It's a nice day. Yeah. What are you doing?
The cow's going, Charlotte. Okay, so
Wilbur.
So I was just having a day. I was having a moment, and I needed something hopeful. So, I mean, it starts out gruesome, but it's ultimately hopeful, as, you know, life is. So I'm going to talk about a couple of survivors, because that just struck me as the thing. And they came up again on my True Crime a Day calendar. And because when I find stuff, I think, oh, I might want to research this further. I tear off the page and stick it in a special spot on my desk. So first, I'm going to mention Rodney Alcala. Have we talked about? Okay, yeah. I thought we had. So I'm not going to... He was also known as the dating game killer because he appeared on the show in 1978, which was like in the middle of him spree raping and killing people. So I'm not telling his story. I mean, I have to talk about who he is to establish the story. When he was apprehended, he had a collection of more than 1,000 photos of women and teenage boys and girls. And many of them were in sexually compromising positions. He was, sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I said that. He was an exquisite piece of shit who tortured his victims repeatedly before killing them. They would, for whatever reason, be unconscious, and he would revive them to continue torturing them. He is definitively linked to 8 murders, but it's believed his victim list could go as high as 130. But this isn't his story. This is the story of his first victim, or his first known victim, which they think is his first victim. So on September 20...
Oh, the little girl.
Yes. September 25th, 1968... 8-year-old Tally Shapiro, who was a second grader, was walking to school down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. Now remember, this was 1968, not 2022, so it's not the same thing. So a man approached her and asked her if she wanted a ride. She said no, and she said she was not supposed to talk to strangers, much less accept rides from them, but he persisted. And he said he wasn't a stranger, he was a friend of her parents, and he had this beautiful photo he was going to show her. So she gets into the car with him. She said later she didn't want to get in the car, but she had been taught to respect her elders. Not an unusual thing to teach your children. And she also said she didn't know enough to fear people. She didn't know that there were people who were bad. Here's something very interesting. A bystander witnessed Tally getting into the car with Alcala and became suspicious. To my knowledge, this person hasn't been publicly identified. I looked in a few. Now, I did not spend 3 weeks researching this, but it almost, because they don't even say male or female. They just say Good Samaritan everywhere.
Yeah.
So not only did this person see her getting into his car and get suspicious, they followed her. Whoever they were, followed the car back to Alcala's apartment and called the police. So Officer Chris Camacho responded to the call. He knocked on the door and identified, this is the police. Got no response. He knocked again, threatened to break down the door. Alcala opens a side window and says, "I'm taking a shower. I can't get to the door. I need to put clothes on." So Camacho kicks the door in. What he found was Tali naked on the floor in a pool of blood with an iron bar across her throat. She had been beaten and raped. While he was tending to Tali, Alcala escaped out the back door. Eventually...
Yeah, I saw an interview with this cop, and he felt such guilt for not catching him, but he was like, I couldn't leave her in that condition. I mean, she had been brutalized.
They weren't even sure she was alive.
Right.
When they walked in.
So he did the absolute right thing.
He absolutely did.
But he's blamed himself for, future...
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
It was a very emotional interview.
So anyway, Alcala escapes, and I don't know why this is such a big deal, but he fled to New York City and enrolled in film school. So, Tali received more than 27 stitches on the back of her head, which was kind of the least of what she suffered. She was in a coma for 32 days and then spent months recovering in the hospital. She even had to relearn how to walk. Mm-hmm. So, when she recovered, her parents moved with her to Mexico. I don't...
They didn't allow her to...
They did not allow her to testify.
Yes.
So, he was tried for the rape and attempted murder of Tali. But he was allowed to plead guilty to a lesser charge of child molestation because her parents wouldn't allow her to testify at his trial. I do not blame them for that.
I don't. But they knew that they couldn't get a conviction without her.
And I agree with their wanting to protect their daughter. I don't know the situation. I don't know what she was like, what state she was in. She did, however, get her day in court because in 2010, and Tali would have been 50 at this time, she testified at Alcala's trial for the murder of 5 women. At the end of her testimony, Alcala shocked her in the entire courtroom by offering an apology. Mm-hmm. He said, "I sincerely regret and apologize for my despicable actions that day." So she didn't respond. She didn't even look at him. And she said later that those words made her sick to her stomach.
Yeah. Well, because he's not sorry.
Well, no, he's not sorry. And he's acting as his own attorney.
Yes.
So,
yes, that's what I remember.
What a fucking idiot.
He even did, voices.
So she eventually married and had a family of her own. She did eventually move back to California as an adult. And he has since been sentenced to death. And she has said that she is satisfied with that. But she's still angry that he was able to continue on and charm so many women and harm so many women. She believes she should have been his first and only victim. And to this day, she has a hard time trusting people. And who can blame her? But like I said, she's a functioning adult. Has a family of her own, and she seems cautious, but not bitter, which certainly can't blame her for that. I am not going to post pictures of her as a child because there were not a lot of pictures of her. I had the feeling she did not want to be in the public.
Yeah, I was trying to, because I talked about her when I did it.
So,
but I don't think I don't remember.
Yeah. So I was like, that I can't even imagine coming back from that. So I thought that was bad. So on December 18th, 1994, this is the second story, 27-year-old insurance broker Alison Boda held a game night at her apartment. She lived in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. And by all reports, she was kind of a very typical South African girl for the time. She had friends, she'd been to university, she had a job, she had an apartment. So at the end of the evening, she drove a friend home and to her apartment. And when she came back, her normal parking spot in front of the building had been taken. So she found a spot nearby. Before she could even open her door, a man with a knife was standing there. His name was Franz Detroit. I fucking don't care if I'm butchering his name. And he said, "Move over or I'll kill you." So she did. And he's got her trapped in her own car. So he climbs in and drives off. He initially told her, "I don't want to hurt you. I just want to use your car for an hour." Then he stopped to pick up another man, Tiens Kruger. I had no idea how to pronounce that one, so I did look that one up. Mm-hmm. They drove Allison's car to a deserted and derelict part of town. And this was a part of town everybody knew was bad. Like her parents had warned her growing up, don't ever go there. And that's where she is now. So I'm just going to tell you the next part is brutal and it's gory. So both men raped Boda. Then they strangled her until she lost consciousness and pulled her from the car. They stabbed her in the abdomen at least 30 times. Detroit said he specifically wanted to mutilate her reproductive organs. And while she was mostly unconscious, she was conscious enough to hear that and remember it. Mm-hmm. The men thought they had killed her until her legs twitched. So then Kruger slashed her throat 16 times. And again, she was conscious enough to remember the wet sound of her throat being slit. Mm-hmm. The men then stole her car and left her for dead on the dirt and the broken glass. When Boda was strangled, her windpipe had been crushed, and that should have killed her. But when he cut her throat, he opened her airway. Uh-huh. He opened her airway, and she was laying there on the ground, dying. So she used her blood to write her attackers' names on the ground. And I think she also wrote, "I love Mom." She's laying there, pretty sure she's dying, and she sees lights go by from passing cars and realizes, that she's not as far as she thought she was, and that if she can get to the road, she might be able to get help. So first of all, she starts crawling and realized that she'd been disemboweled and there are actual intestines outside of her body. And she picks up a shirt she finds on the ground and uses it to hold her intestines in. That's with one hand. Her neck wound was so deep that when she staggered to her feet, her head fell backward. Ugh. So she's got one hand holding her intestines in, the other one holding her head up. And she's staggering to the road, and she's falling. She talked about every time she fell down, she knew she had to get back up. So she finally gets all the way to the road and lays across the line because she realizes if she just lays on the side of the road, nobody's going to see her. No. So a veterinary student named Tian Eilard spotted her and stopped. He was a veterinary student, so he used the skills he had to tend to her bleeding, to do this, that, and the other while they're waiting for the ambulance. And she was rushed to a hospital and began undergoing the first of many, many surgeries. One doctor said he'd never seen such extensive injuries in his years of practicing medicine. Because that's brutal.
Who probably had, at least probably coroners have seen it.
Yes.
Medical examiners, but not a doctor.
Yes. Despite the fact that when they put her back together, they told her, "You're not ever going to be able to have children after this." But when they stabbed her, they didn't hit an artery, and they were not able to hit her reproductive organs. And she did later in life give birth to 2 sons. She met a man who had suffered trauma of his own, and they were friends for a long time, and then they fell in love. They got married. They had 2 sons. Although her 2 attackers were tried and convicted on a number of charges, including kidnapping, rape, and attempted murder, she still felt like she had more to do. So she became one of the first women in South Africa to speak publicly about rape, and she has become a motivational speaker, and she talks all over the world. She goes to all different countries, talks about what happened to her, telling her story and encouraging other victims and survivors to come forward. Also, and I don't know why I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm not. She was one of the first people to talk about, your body's physical reaction to being raped.
Good.
And a lot of survivors have come up to her and thanked her because they're like, nobody tells you this.
Well, it's like when you read an interview with somebody who was also sexually molested as a child. And one of the biggest things they feel guilty about is that any parts felt good in that, and also say their body's reaction to something, which is what your body is supposed to do.
Yes.
And so, and that's also something I talk about with rape victims.
Yep.
That I've seen senators and stuff use that. Well, if she lubricate, whatever.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And it's like, that's what your body's trained to do. It's trained to
it's an automatic reflex.
Process that so that there's less physical harm to you.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm glad that she's talked about that,
yes.
because that sort of thing is one of the things that rape and molestation survivors constantly go over in their heads, right? And blame themselves for and think that they somehow did something wrong when they didn't. Their brain was just doing its job with their body,
Yeah.
So,
and the brain wasn't even involved. It was the body taking over.
Right.
And protecting itself. So both of these attackers are still in prison. However, they are eligible for parole because everybody in South Africa sentenced before a certain date, which I did not write down because why would I? Everybody who was convicted, it sounded like of any crime before a certain year is eligible for parole.
Oh, shit.
I'm like, what the?
There's going to be some terrifying people come back out there.
However, every time they come up for parole, petitions to deny the parole have circulated, and so far it's been denied. And the last update I could find was in December of 2020.
Okay, like what I said with the moms, what these guys did is a crime they will repeat.
Oh, yes, they will.
But they'll make sure they don't leave somebody alive this time. They have learned their lesson. It has been covered. They now know what to do.
Yeah.
They should never get out. So that's like that. That's how I define this shit.
Yes.
Are they going to reoffend? Should be one of the major questions asked when sentencing somebody.
Yes.
Is this something where they will reoffend?
And I should point out, Alcala, the guy I was talking about in the first instance, he's dead. He died in prison.
Yeah, not that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't... I
think that's why I covered him.
I don't think he was executed, but he died.
Yeah.
I don't care how he died. I hope it was slow and painful.
I don't remember. It's usually cancer.
I hope it was...
So one hopes, right?
So one hopes. So my sources were, of course, my
go-to
crime a day calendar. The website horrorobsessive.com, Wikipedia, People Magazine, and allthatisinteresting.com. So
there's some dark stories for everybody today, but some survivors.
Yes. Yes. Not everybody can survive, but it's like, I'm like, if you think, and I know you can't predict how you're going to react in a given situation, but I'm like, fuck it. If you think you're going to die anyway, why not fight? Why not try? And these, I want to make it clear, these people did not fight back. They were in no condition to fight back.
Right.
But they had the mental determination to try to survive.
Right.
To try to keep going. And this woman crawled with her guts hanging out.
And her head trying to fall off.
And her head trying to fall off. And her murderer, her attempted murderer actually saved her life by slashing her throat.
Right? Joke's on him. That's irony.
That is.
Sometimes I have trouble defining irony, but that is irony.
And she said, she was asked in an interview about her, because she has two sons, are you going to tell them? And she said, yes, I will tell them what happened to me as they ask about it. I want them to know that, I want them to hear it from me. I don't want them to read it on the internet or whatever. And they were still quite young in this interview. And she said, I think her older son was 5 years old. And she said, he asked me about a scar on my throat. So I told him I got hurt. And sometimes when you get hurt, it leaves a scar that everyone can see.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. Yeah, okay. So that was, and I just, I'm like, somebody who gets that beat to shit and still comes back.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yes. The power to survive. That's what we're ending on. The power to survive.
So on that note, folks, check us out on www.buymeacoffee/MMM.
Mayhem.
That's right.
I
And
started to say it, then I went, what if I fuck it up?
that just goes to help with overhead costs. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.